Welcome back, Focus Learners. Today, we're jumping straight into a brand new explainer. We are looking at an absolutely fascinating shift happening right now across an entire continent. We're exploring Europe's circular economy, and specifically the legislative blueprint that's actually making it a reality.
It's one thing to talk about a zero-waste future. We all want that, right? But how do you actually mandate it legally? How do you take an abstract environmental goal and turn it into tangible, enforceable law across multiple nations? Well, that's exactly what we're breaking down today.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to hit Europe's circular economy drivers, the Waste Framework Directive, how they're targeting single-use plastics, the overhaul of packaging rules, and finally, the economic instruments and funding making it all happen. Let's get into it.
Starting off with Section 1, Europe's circular economy drivers.
So the whole foundation of a thriving circular economy really relies on robust, enforceable policies. Europe is actively crafting laws designed to prevent waste, recover economic value, and minimize climate impact. Basically, the goal is to legally enforce the waste hierarchy. That means prioritizing prevention and reuse over just chucking things in a landfill, while supporting robust markets for secondary raw materials. It's about changing the very conditions of how waste is generated in the first place.
Moving on to Section 2, the Waste Framework Directive. This is really the foundational rulebook.
The absolute most crucial point here is that this directive legally compels EU member states to actively prevent waste before it's even created. It mandates public participation and deep cooperation across sectors to make this happen, which is a massive paradigm shift. It moves us completely away from just managing trash after the fact.
In practice, this means some pretty strict new rules for manufacturers. They literally have to prioritize resource-efficient eco-design and ensure product repairability. Think making spare parts and manuals readily available. It also heavily targets reducing food waste to foster donation, limits hazardous substances and products, and demands the creation of highly transparent extended producer responsibility, or EPR systems.
Now, historically, a lot of developed nations would just sort of export their unmanaged waste and call it a day. But Europe is totally reversing the burden of proof here. This rule forces exporters to definitively prove without a doubt that their waste is being safely managed in the receiving country before it can ever be legally counted as recycled. It's a real game changer for international waste trade.
All right, Section 3, targeting single-use plastics.
Here's where we see Europe using legislative sticks, direct market interventions for everyday items. On one hand, you've got outright bans on items where sustainable alternatives already exist. We're talking plastic cutlery, plates, straws, stirrers, cotton bud sticks, and those expanded polystyrene food containers. Boom, gone. On the other hand, you have strict design requirements for the plastics that do remain. For example, PET bottles must contain 25% recycled plastic by 2025, and there are strict mandates for highly legible waste management markings to inform consumers about the environmental impact.
Have you opened a drink recently and wondered why the plastic bottle suddenly has a cap stubbornly attached to it? Well, here is your answer, 2024. The directive mandated that by July 2024, single-use plastic bottles must have caps and lids attached to the containers. It's designed to avoid environmental loss and to actively facilitate recycling. It's a highly visible mandate that affects hundreds of millions of consumers every single day.
Next up, Section 4, overhauling packaging rules.
The progressive ambition of this legislation is honestly massive. Just compare the strict recycling targets for 2025 against the tighter goals for 2030. For plastic, the target jumps from 50% to 55%. For paper and cardboard, it pushes to an aggressive 85% by 2030. The directive isn't just gently suggesting we recycle more, it is legally binding member states to hit these exact escalating numbers.
So how does all this actually get funded and managed? Well, the directive requires those extended producer responsibility, or EPR schemes, to be established for all packaging by December 31st, 2024. This means producers are now held fully, financially, and operationally responsible for the post-consumer stage of all their packaging. Put simply, if you make the packaging, you pay for its collection, transport, and recycling.
And finally, Section 5, economic instruments and funding. Let's follow the money.
To actually make these laws work, Europe is using a clever mix of financial punishments and rewards. Member states are setting up deposit refund schemes, which have proven to achieve incredibly high recycling levels for beverage containers. But right alongside those rewards are penalties, like pay-as-you-throw landfill charges. We're also seeing green public procurement,
the phase-out of unsustainable subsidies, and direct fiscal incentives to make recovered and reused products much more economically attractive.
Backing all this up is a massive wave of structural funding. We're talking 250 million euros. The Horizon 2020 program has injected over €250 million specifically into circular economy research and development. This kind of cash supports everything from finding alternative materials like bioplastics to integrating AI and robotics sorting and waste management plants just to meet these new legal requirements.
But you know what? Even that isn't enough. As the European Commission notes, to meet the objectives of this strategy, the scale of private and public investment must significantly increase. Transitioning an entire continent's waste sector from a linear take, make, dispose model to a circular one requires an absolutely unprecedented mobilization of capital. We're looking at a massive shift in taxation, public procurement, and private funding.
So we've seen how Europe is using strict laws, targeted funding, and structural overhauls to systematically eliminate waste. From banning single-use plastics to mandating that producers pay for the cleanup, they are actively writing the legislative blueprint for a sustainable future. But it leaves us with one massive lingering question to ponder. Europe has written the rules for a circular economy, but will the rest of the world follow the blueprint? Thanks for joining us for this explainer. Focused learners, keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.